What if God isn't some distant figure in the clouds, but the very force that makes you whole, centered, and unstoppable as a man? Every man is searching for power, but most men are actually disconnected from the source. Today, we're going to explore how to break free from the boxes of religion and dive deeper into truth. Brian and I understand that God isn't religion, but that God is actually reality, everywhere present, within you
Amen.
and all around you. And aligning with that presence is what makes a man truly invincible. And so here we are today to explore and unpack the significance or the essential and maybe mystical meaning of what an invincible man really is or what invincible man means. There's something more fundamental to you and to I that, if tapped into, will begin to surge within and overflow without into our families, into our friends, into our community, into our business, into finance. There's something wise already present. When the noise is calmed, when we release our grip and all of our striving, there's a sense of relaxation and a sense of aliveness already within, buried maybe in many men, but something that can be resurrected in you. So as we explore this conversation and we cover the topic of God and spirituality, I invite you to really consider that what we're sharing is not the normal perspective, but something that will bring resonance within your own being and aliveness to you, that the presence of God gets to be felt, known, and experienced as reality, not as concept, not as doctrine, not as a belief system, but as an experiential livingness within your very being. So, Brian, happy to enter this conversation with you. Would love to hear some of your perspectives as we move forward here. Let's get this on.
Yeah, well, let's just start it with I love what you say there around the reality of God. And I think that's where I want to enter is that most of us have this concept of what God is. And it is this opposing and different perspectives of this concept that has us in such division. ChatGPT just told me that 88% of Americans believe in God.
Mm.
88% believe in God.
Wow.
How do we have so much fucking division?
Wow.
Because
Well, it's the
everybody's
God
got a
they believe
different
in.
perspective of
Yeah.
this concept.
Yeah.
And so that's great. All the different perspectives do lead to a different version, some more truth about that concept. When I can look at it at this angle, it looks different than when I look at it at this angle, right?
Mm.
There's value in all the religions and ways that you can know the inner truth. And I don't want to come at it like we're experts also of everything about this most unfathomable power and divine source. We definitely don't, but we've found it for ourselves and we know how to walk other people that way. Thanks,
Hmm.
babe.
Hmm.
So, that's what we want to anybody who's listening to knows that our mission is to help others and especially men find their divine source, to find the God within. And we've got many perspectives and we can highlight what that looks like. But the biggest difference I see in the world, Vince, and this is where I'm going to pass it off to you, is that God is a concept for most people. It doesn't live like an experience.
Hmm.
People do not walk, do not be moment by moment with this knowing. And that is the downfall of humanity. That is what's missing. And that's the mission of all human beings' life to come in, to find it, and to be one with it.
Mhm.
So the ball is yours, sir.
Mm.
Pass.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's there's so much there that you brought attention to. So important. Going back to the very beginning, I love the many angles. My background started with the Zen Buddhist foundation as like my first spiritual discipline, and which Zen Buddhism is not a religion. It's a practice. It's a way of living, and it's a form of training. There's mentorship. There's the Zen master, etc. So it's not like there's nothing to believe in. It's actually an undoing, and that's what was so
Mm,
appealing to Zen uh, about Zen for me. As I was studying and learning about it, it was like there was a seated practice of just watching the breath and watching what's unfolding in the moment, right?
mm,
And I didn't understand at the time how to explain any of that. I just was entering into the practice. What I now understand about the practice is that I was practicing just sitting as awareness, the most fundamental unit of consciousness,
mm,
pre-interpretation, precognition, pre-emotion even. And there's something fundamental about us, this awareness, that we just take for granted. It's ever present. It's the one thing that doesn't change, no matter how young or old we are. That is the same thing that we all share in common.
mm,
It's just pure awareness. There's no opinions there. There's no religious perspective there. There's
mm,
just seeing, sensing, feeling as an observer of those conditions. And we tend to, as I saw for myself and started to discover there in the beginning, was that I believed I was my mind and emotions and my body, and my reactive conditionings are what I am. If I'm angry and pissed off, I'll let you know about it. Like whatever. Like if I'm depressed and sad, well, that's the truth for the moment too. It's
mm,
like everything was true, and I was identified with all of the happening within me and also within the world around me. And
mm,
so the meditation practice, the reason I position this because this is extremely important when it comes to experiential knowing of this thing we call God. If we want to get beyond the realm of conceptual perspective and beliefs that are not tested or validated, the recognition of oneself as awareness is the ground. And so I was very fortunate to come in through that pathway before I found other, value in mystical and religious and spiritual experiences and perspective. That gave me the access to the
mm,
experiential reality. And the first thing that had to happen was this distinction between my mind, emotions, and my body functions and the activity in the world around me, and then just this inner stillness that was like able to just look at all of that. And I stopped reacting. Well, let me say it this way: the reactions were happening internally, but now there was this buffer where I could feel the impulse of wanting to react in whatever way it was, whether it was
mm,
lustfully eating my food, right? I noticed that. I was like, oh, like I'm eating like my dad, or I have this impulse to do it, but I would sit and I was like, I could feel that energy. And then I could actually consciously now, I had a choice. I could do that, just let that run me, or pause and just take the food in slow. And I watched my dad, he was shoveling food in his mouth, like literally. And I was like going at it that way. And I paused and I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. Like, that's just, he's not even thinking. And so I was like being more at one with that when I started washing the dishes. Cause then it's all about, the teaching is like, whatever you're doing, do that. That's what there is.
mm.
Sounds so overly simplistic. And yet it's a practice of not getting all wrapped up in our busy mind and being with what's really here and now.
Mm.
And that did something for me. And so we'll just lay that as a foundation. I'm going to pass the ball back to you because I'm sure you've got a lot to share on those lines, and then we'll go deeper.
Yeah. Well, just to share for the audience, I much came to God the same way, coming from an atheist background to maybe having a couple of experiences in my life where I'd say I was agnostic, like, I just don't know. Like maybe there's got to be something to this power of God. I think
Mm-hmm.
just conceptually, it was clear to me that there's something about the power of belief But then Buddhism, and I would say it was just meditation. They didn't call it Buddhism. It's just called Vipassana meditation. You
Mhm.
come in, you pay attention to your breath, then you pay attention to the sensations in your body, and you're scanning your body for a week at a time, actually 10 days. And this literally was my opening to the same experience where I now had a buffer to the experience of life, the sensations on my body,
Mhm.
and this is how I was clear. I am not my mind motions and the body itself. I am not this physical thing. Therefore, I am this spirit. I am this experience coming in.
Mhm.
Right. So, like, that was my awakening as well. And there was something you said. Let me see if I can gravitate because it's where I wanted to take this.
The reactions that I observed maybe and not acting from them.
Yeah. Well, I think what it did for me in much the same way it does for you or did for you is it opened me to being able to have presence
Mm.
and knowing exactly what the present moment was for me.
Mhm.
And that was my true access to how am I being and what is fueling me and what are the thoughts and emotions I'm getting at this moment that actually came from the feeling that came 5 minutes before that, actually that external thing gave me that feeling
Mhm.
subconsciously. And then my mind has been rattling for the last 5 minutes about that thing. And I feel now this way,
Mhm.
right? Like
Mhm.
that experience is universal,
Mhm.
how that works as for humans. And I got it for myself.
Mhm.
And that was the doorway to understanding how to find God,
Mm.
how to be centered, how to find the vein of power that is there, and how to know if it's authentic
Mm.
and real versus something that my mind is shuffling and playing with and trying to convince myself of, right? The ego and its mind and ego, I don't know if there's much difference as far as I can tell, and I'm curious what you think. They are
Mhm.
the same.
Mhm.
And there's value in the mind. We need the mind. It is a survival tool. It helps us navigate this context called life.
Mhm.
And we have to surrender that thing by knowing what is the center, by feeling the moment, by being present, by knowing what my presence is and having like that identified is like all part of it. Then the mind can actually create from there, and that's like a brilliant dance that it does. But I'm just gonna I'm stuck with this, and because where do we go with this, Vince? Because this is the doorway
Mhm.
that you and I both have found,
Mhm.
and I know it's replicable for all human beings who
Mhm.
have an earnest desire. That's really all it takes.
Definitely.
So what do you say?
Thanks. There's so much there. Thank you for all of that. And the um, what's based on your last part of the word that you gave is just this practice that I now do with my clients or what we'll do in the men's group or whenever I'm coaching. It's really what I'm implementing always is bringing the Zen master foundation, which means the Zen master's role was to help move the student, right, the disciple, away from his reactive mind and conditioning. And there were many different ways that would happen. So
Mm,
is what I find myself doing with clients, relaxing them down, regulating the nervous system, which when a nervous system is regulated, it's not hyperactive or over or super dull and dead, right? It starts to come into an aliveness again and a balance, and there's a stabilization of consciousness and emotion
mm,
is, smoothing out. And that creates a sense of present awareness, like awareness of the moment. And that's what precedes the experience of God, which, you know, depending on who the person is listening, we think of experiencing God in many different ways, but it's like it's actually, well, it can be profound, but it can also be quite ordinary. So ordinary that it's so easily missed. But
Mm,
when the mind is clear and the emotions are clear, then it's like I was in meditation a few months ago, and I remember having this like sudden shift, sitting, I don't remember how long, maybe 20, 30 minutes, and just sitting quietly, just really letting go, not even trying to think about anything. Sometimes I will meditate and think about things like on purpose, but this time I just wanted to be still. And then it was like all of a sudden just a shift into like, oh, nothing changed around me. The environment stayed exactly the same, but there
mm,
was just a sense of the continuum of the rhythm of life through it all.
mm,
And it was just a knowing of like, wow, it's all interwoven. And it was felt and it was flow. And
mm,
I didn't see, light or mystical. I saw everything as it was, but just in a new way that felt like I popped into heavenly dimensions.
mm,
Nothing visual changed, just this deepening of of oneness with all of it.
mm,
Because my awareness, or the awareness that we are, really is what I should say, was not filtered through the mind and the emotions. They got so calm and so quiet that
mm,
everything that is present was experienced as wholeness. And that may sound rather simple, but it's really what we're all striving for. I don't care what it is you think is going to bring you happiness. Like, I know I've chased after it all, and I've had it all, and like, you name it, money, power, sex, all the freaking things that men want, right? I've had all of those
mm,
things and still been empty and devoid of a sense of wholeness.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, my conspiracy mind, I think about the way that the world works and the sin, the devil, as Christianity has framed this element, right, of sin and the evil over there to oppose. Like there's a value in contrast. So I
Mm-hmm.
get the value of that, but I just think about the like society's designed to keep you away from this experience of wholeness.
Mm-hmm. I don't actually have that perspective.
Well, I don't
Um,
know that it is. I'm just saying it occurs that way.
it can occur that way. Um, but just as a scientist that I am,
Hmm.
I always check a perspective, right? Like a hypothesis has to be tested and put through the
Sure.
fire. So when I look out into the world, when I hear you say that, I'm like, well, there's so much design that facilitates the possibility of wholeness and freedom and experience of abundance, right?
Hmm.
I mean, when I think about the fact, things that people take for granted, that I used to take for granted, but I'd be driving down the highway. I remember in Florida one day, I was driving on the road and I was like, wow, we're freaking blessed, bro. Like we have like highways. I can go to my grandma's in like an hour or less, which in the old days would have taken years. In other countries right now, it takes a long time to get somewhere still for certain people. And I
Yep.
just realized like what a super abundance of opportunity we have. I don't think society is designed to suppress. There may be people active. No, well, there definitely are people actively attempting this, right? But I don't
Hmm.
think it's as a whole. That's the overall design. I think the design reveals progressiveness towards abundance and prosperity. I think I don't blame externals. I think it's an internal issue, and I think that humans are not being responsible for themselves, and they're not taking a moment to consider what really matters and values. They're feeding into consumerism. Like, look, we vote with our dollar, so you can blame corporations, you can blame this, that, and the other, but it's like, what's really fueling that? You can blame drug dealers, but it's the drug addict that's buying the drug. Like, they're going to go get drugs somewhere else. So I
Hmm.
think change has to happen at the grassroots ground level. And I think the upper level people taking advantage, I was a drug dealer. If my clients, I call them, that sounds so bad, but if my people were not buying from me anymore, I don't have a business.
You would have sold something else.
I would have had to change businesses, right? I would have found something else. So
Yep.
And I did multiple things. I had multiple streams of income.
Well, okay. Let me throw it out at you like this. Why is it so evasive, this experience of wholeness, with all the 88% who say they believe in God?
Yeah.
They'd have to, there's only a certain percentage of those people who are just operating on a belief level and some kind of knowledge level and not an experiential level, right?
Well,
So,
there's a scripture that says, like, to the one who wants to know God, they must believe, right? Or have some kind of like intention to know God, right? That and know that God is as a possibility and that God is a rewarder of those that diligently seek God. And I think we're just not the momentum of human being is towards surviving or entertaining. And I think we're born into a world where we're either surviving or just given over to the entertainment or the
mm,
doingness of living. And I just think that we see that, we observe that, we have mirror neurons. And so we adopt as young children these patterns of what's already been happening.
mm,
And unless there's an interruption, which is usually a crisis, or just some inner, like, suddenly, like, I want something different.
mm,
For me, it was a crisis, drug overdose, and then the recognition that my life doesn't work severely. I almost got myself killed. And if I don't change this, I won't make it.
mm,
And so then there was the desire to find something other than whatever I was being, anything, though not knowing
mm,
what. And that's what happened for me. But there's people I know that just suddenly just get curious about what may be possible. Some people go to churches or spiritual groups and they have an experience that moves them. A lot of times that ends up becoming like a trap because now they think, I had this experience here in this church and therefore this is the way and the truth and the only way. And like,
mm,
and then they start condemning every other possible pathway of experiencing the divine. And
mm,
it's challenging for me because I love Jesus and I love the church, but it's like, I don't love the hard edged, Christian condemnation against things that, in my experience, have truly made God more present and alive for me. So that are not
mm,
necessarily found in a church context.
mm. So this is actually a great segue because
Mhm.
one, I guess first I want to let our listeners know, men especially, if you want to experience God and you have an earnest desire, connect with us. We'll make sure you're on that path and
Mhm.
you will experience God and you will know it for yourself. Like we're not going to tell you anything about it, right? We're
That's
going to have
key.
you experience,
It's key.
right? So then what I really want to dive into is like, okay, so this thing opened you up. And then how does Zen Buddhism translate to the other form of truth, Christianity? Like how did
Mhm.
that come for you? And what do you see is in your developing awareness and your own personal path of how you've progressed?
Gosh. It's a great question. There's a lot to unpack there. I'm going to compress the data real quick. Give me a moment
Yep.
so I can simplify this. Okay. A couple things come through simple. The practice of pure awareness through Zen Buddhist meditation and the the Zen master to disciple um, study, like what that looks like, and experience of that, letting my mind be challenged, countered, questioned, uh, which started to release my mind from its certainties.
Mm,
That was key.
mm,
Uh, we don't like in the Western culture to be uncertain. Christianity is all about faith, which is all about certainty. And that's a beautiful thing. But to get to true certainty, like real faith, like the faith of knowing, not just the faith of conceptualizing, uncertainty is a prerequisite. So I've had this balance of Eastern and Western religious, spiritual, mystical training and practice since the beginning.
mm,
And for me, it is the yin and the yang. It's a true balance. Like it's a both and world. It's not an either or. The Eastern perspective is like it's more feminine, it's more open, it's more possibility based. It's we don't know what we don't know. It's and that clashes with the I'm right and you're wrong attitude of Western culture. It's our religion is the only way. So I couldn't, I have my own want to be right and need to be right about other things. But when it comes to the religious perspectives, I'm just like, there's what I know and there's what I don't know. So I had this foundation of pure awareness and pure being and like operating there. I was hungry for absolute truth. I was anti-Christian, anti-Bible, but one day I got Jesus. And the challenge here is when I say that word, people might interpret that as a lot of different things. But for me, I I witnessed the center of the universe, the center of my own being, as this particular dynamic, experientially possible living principle of being. And I knew, coming from a cognitive place of absolute rejection of Jesus and Christianity, I suddenly just knew as an awareness, not as a mental concept, that Jesus Christ is a name that signifies something that literally is universally central
Mm.
and all encompassing and all inclusive, meaning all humanity literally is in this thing called Jesus Christ. What I was experiencing was like a toroidal field of light that pulsed from the center of my being. And I was fully aware of the inclusiveness of all living being. And that's why Jesus Christ suddenly became like known, because it was like, oh, this whole redemption. And, I heard all the concepts, but I was like, whatever, it didn't make any sense to me. The forgiveness of sin, shortcoming, the love your enemies, right? Or love your neighbor as yourself. Well, when I saw the oneness of everything, then it was just like an obvious understanding that those statements about Jesus Christ are all true. I was
Mm.
experiencing the centrality of being. That is what the name points to. So I got
Mm.
a perspective of Jesus Christ before. Of course, I heard little things here and there, and I read some things, but from other authors. I was reading a lot of books, right? But none of that was real for me. Suddenly it became alive for me. And then I became interested in what the church had to share, or what the Bible had to say. And from there, I started to learn about Christian culture. I started to realize there's a lot of narrow mindedness and lack of openness to other religious perspectives that I was coming from, that for me, based on this new experience of Jesus Christ, the central axis of living being within me, within everyone, within everything, that also connected with what I had learned from my Hindu studies and
Mm.
other spiritual perspectives that weren't necessarily Christian perspectives, but think language that people were expressing was suddenly realized as true experientially. Like, it was conceptual, a lot of the language I was receiving, but now it was alive. And
Mm.
so from that moment, it was impossible for me to reject the other religious perspectives that pointed to this experience that I was now having. Like, I could not deny
Mm.
language was accurate.
Mm.
The Bhagavad Gita talks about different perspectives, the absolute being, right? Or the nature of, like, we got Krishna, and his character, and, there's principles of perspectives. His dealings with Arjuna is like these stories came alive.
Mm.
So for me, God is pervasive, all that. Now, the Jesus Christ thing was the central, most brilliant. I didn't see Krishna. I didn't see Buddha. I didn't see all of that. I understood those characters. I didn't see Jesus Christ as a man either. I just understood that Jesus Christ is all men.
Mm.
And that's hard for Christians to swallow. But I saw that he's a universal archetype of man's origin.
Mm.
We come out of this prototypical Son of God. He's the pattern of perfection and possibility and our divine potential. And we can align with that. And that's where I want to leave you with the next ball here. Is like, in your court, it's aligning with this core livingness is the real game. Religion's purpose is to bring
Mm.
alignment between humans and the divine. That's its pure intent.
Mm-hmm.
Not every religion's playing that game. or every group of religious people are playing that game. But fundamentally, that is the purest form of religion, is to create an alignment possibility with man and God.
Mm. Yes, beautiful. And I want to go to the alignment, but
Mm-hmm.
before we go to alignment, I want to bring this back to a very secular conversation
Mm-hmm.
about how this is operating, how it works, that one can be one with Jesus. Like, what could possibly be happening when somebody says, like, "Oh, I'm feeling whole again," right? I'm feeling like I now am connected to God, right? So let's just break this down into the X's and O's of
Mm-hmm.
physics,
Mm-hmm.
of the stuff that you and I know we love it. We get grounded in the reality
Mm-hmm.
of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's have a little conversation about that. And then we'll get into like how that literally manifests in the alignment. So part of my alignment is to get grounded to what I can experience and what is real for me,
Mm-hmm.
what is truth.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what just to take that same vein, what is truth and what is real is the present moment. Like that's all there is.
Without the interpretation,
Yeah.
that's got to be
I mean,
distinguished.
I have my own interpretation.
Yeah.
Everybody does.
Yeah.
And then I've got to be with that present moment. And what I start to get is again some distance between the awareness and then what's operating, what's going on, what the body feels like, what the mind is saying, all the things that are going on. And then there's a feeling, an overall kind of like experience about it, right? Like these three things are literally what's there. And then I can surmise like my energy signature. Like,
Mm-hmm.
here's what's coming out. I have a mix of excitement right now. I have a mix of
Mm-hmm.
a little discovery and something new is about to happen, right? I have an energy that is willing to come forth and keeps going, right? It is
Mm-hmm.
generative.
Mm-hmm.
That's my current moment,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I can now identify those things when I am tuned into this moment,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that is the grounding of all reality is like there's no such thing as a past. There's no such thing as a future. There really is only the present moment. And all the past and the present or the past and the future are just concepts. They're things that we carry on in our head. We project to the future and we
Mm-hmm.
remember what already happened. All that dictates what goes on right now
Mm-hmm.
in our experience. That is reality. There's no denying that. Come, man, to this understanding, because if you don't, you are missing reality. You are missing what is real, what is true. So, from this reality base, I'm going to pass the ball to you, sir. What is the X's and O's of God?
Gosh, I love mechanics, and I love, physics, and I love structure and order and laws that can be seen and understood and proven. So I've always approached the divine encounter from that scientific ground, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Experience trumps concept or hypothesis or theory, right? Which theories can be useful and they're a good starting. I started with studying theories naturally because I was studying other people's perspectives. And Celestine Prophecy was like a book that inspired this, right? Talking about the possibility of aligning with the divine. Like, and that was the only way to really escape the four dramas that human beings play out, where we're trying to steal energy from each other. Like there's different ways we play a game. It's like to get people's attention to manipulate energetic forces through human relating. And
Mm-hmm.
so I love that perspective because I saw myself in all four of the dramas. I was like, oh my God, I do all of these things. And like the interrogator, the aloof, these different, just one's passive, one's aggressive, right? There's these, but either way,
Mm-hmm.
it's whether you're passive or you're aggressive, it's a manipulation tactic to make up for a sense of inner lack. So some of the mechanics of knowing God and experiencing God is understanding that there is this illusion of lack that we carry first and foremost. What the Bible calls sin It's
Mm,
self-negation, translating the word accurately. You could say miss the mark. It was used in that sense, but fundamentally it means, you know, without form.
mm,
You're outside of your design,
mm.
right? Like
Yeah.
you don't know what you are. And so it's
Yeah.
an
You're
identity
lost.
breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
Sin is an identity breakdown essentially, not what you do. Your behavioral breakdowns flow from the identity breakdown. I became a
Mm,
criminal and a drug dealer. That was my behavior. But there was an identity breakdown as a child where
mm.
my sense of self was shattered
You were broken.
completely. Now I'm desperate to regain control, power, which looks like money and violence to me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because people that I was surrounded by, I was modeling them. People have different strategies. That became mine because of what I was in, the environment I was in. And
Mm-hmm.
I modeled that. But it was all built on a broken sense of self.
Mm,
And I think that's when it comes to knowing God, you know, mechanically speaking, the first thing I do with all my clients through my coaching training and, you know, the training of the coaches, even it's like the working with clients, it's guiding them to identify the fabricated identity, what I call self illusion, but it
mm,
doesn't live as self illusion for the individual. You know,
mm.
it usually all lives as, well, that's what I am, or this is
That's the
who I
default.
am.
Yeah.
So we got to identify those mechanisms, structures, and how it plays out. So I bring light to that. That's an inquiry, that's an investigation that we make together. It's experiential. The studying the mechanics of what we think is the self is for me prime, because otherwise, even if you have an epiphany of God for a moment, if that's still running in the background, which the mind, emotions, and body, subconscious patterns just they flow, there's a momentum there for however
Mm,
many years. We can't really know truth. And like I said, truth is, you know, observing everything without interpretation. And that's kind of boring sounding. But it really, if you want truth, it's like take away all the interpretation and just see what's happening. What's the truth? Missiles are flying into Israel and, you know, Iran right now. You know, like
mm,
that's just what's happening. Then there's
mm-hmm.
all the opinions about that and the feelings, the emotions, the pain that people are going through. But the fact is, it is what it is. For
Mm,
whether we like it or not, we can't say it's not happening. And
mm-hmm.
that's difficult for us to accept. We don't accept the painful things. When my stepdad beat my mom, I was resisting that. When I
Mm,
got beaten myself, I was resisting that. And not saying that that's bad necessarily, but we hold it, like you mentioned, you know, we hold the past. And then that holding, it becomes a part of how we build our identity to try and avoid and escape something that's long, long back in history.
mm,
So we're preserving something that's past in the present without knowing it, which makes us not actually fully present to what's here and now.
mm,
But in a sense, that is here and now, but it's an unconsciously present thing. And so it just that distorts our worldview. Our sense of self is not accurate. It's inauthentic.
mm.
So I'll pause there. We got to break that down before we get into the God experience because that gets in the way of the
Mm.
reality experience of God as like,
Yeah.
I am one with God right now. And wherever I am, that's where God is. Like, that's the goal of the experience that we want to bring
Mhm.
men to, right? The invincible man is realizing I am the life that was and is to come.
Mm,
My body will perish, but the life I am, it's always been around and it ain't never going to stop going round. And
mhm,
that's the experience of immortality, the experience of everlasting life and truth. And it's clean.
mm. Yeah. I just remember the quote of that comedian who was making fun of the Christians.
What's
They
he?
actually believe they're gonna live forever.
Oh yeah, the satirist, the Greek satirist. Yeah, like they believe that they're immortal for all time.
All right. So
Wow.
that's the experience. And such a beautiful coalescence and the way God works in mysterious ways, that is the first step of aligning.
Hmm.
We have to let go of all the baggage that we are already not it,
Yeah.
that we are not God, right? That We have to find all the conditioning that we've lived ourselves, that we believed ourselves into, that we've gotten to just know that like God is here and now, and I am part of that. I am of that
Mhm.
of all times. And
That's what repentance is, by the way. Metanoia in
uh,
Greek, meta and noia. Noia means mind, right? And meta means like, let's say, transcending or a change through an encounter.
mm,
So repentance is actually, it's about transcending your old perspective within the mind.
mm, yeah, yeah, so perfect, really.
Well, that's what the
It's-
gospel is like. The gospel of repent, go and preach
yeah,
repentance. Go preach repentance to the nations, basically, is the idea of
yeah,
the mission of the gospel. Well, that sounds like go make people sorrowful and feel like a
yeah.
piece of garbage. And it's like,
Repent,
yeah, no, it's like
and
change.
thou shalt be
It's
saved.
change your mind. You're not a broken human.
Yeah,
Change your mind. You're one with God. Change
yeah.
your heart and soul that you really are the mystery of the universe right here, right now, already present as
Mm,
you. And it's like, that's the repentance that's meant to be taught to all the nations, you know?
mm. Yes. And then there's like, how would somebody actually make that leap of faith from another human who's telling them that you are already it? Like what?
Yeah.
So,
That's where,
like,
that's why I became
I'm
a
in
coach,
this
because I realized
experience.
there's a process for most people that need to be guided
Yeah,
through.
yeah.
It's like,
So there's this experience, my experience, and like that's great. That sounds awesome. I might even want to believe that, but I can't. I can't take this leap of faith that I am Jesus Christ and that Jesus Christ is my savior and all this other extrapolation from the truth is what I want to, the way it
mhm,
looks
mhm.
from coming from where I was coming from. So what is the first, like, just give us some mechanics. Like, what do I have to let go of? How do I get still enough
Yeah,
to
I
see the
want to go
first
into that, but I
glimpse?
want to kind of pull back to the Jesus Christ pathway for a minute, and that why it's
Okay.
effective for some, and why maybe it's not for others too. I think that's kind of like important to nail real
Okay.
quick. It's like, you know, if the story of Jesus and the idea of Jesus can be very powerful when we realize like my life doesn't work. I don't know how to do my life. And then we hear that there's someone who loves you enough just the way you are, that literally gave himself up to prove to you, to make it plain and clear that there's nothing you can do to escape the love of God and the value that God has for you. That story is extremely powerful to this day. And there are millions of people's lives changing because in their brokenness, which is a prerequisite to discovering this truth of who you are, your identity must be crushed. It must be broken. However you think of yourself, however good it is, even. Because only then do you become dependent on something greater than the rigidity of your personal identity.
Hmm.
And if you're dependent on the rigidity of your personal identity, it perishes. And we know it perishes. We watch people dropping like flies all around us. We lose family members and friends, and it's like, where are they now? Ooh, you know, it goes, and we know it goes. We try to make up stories about it not going, but it goes. And we try to believe things about it, but we're not really convinced. We're just numbing ourselves to the fear that we have. We don't
Hmm.
know necessarily, right? Like most people, there can be a knowing. I'm just saying most people don't really know, they pretend to.
Hmm.
That's a belief versus experience. But I think the story of Jesus is really critical and important because it's a true story. It's a story that exists for all of us. It's a story of redemption, meaning I was sold as a slave to a corrupt identity. I didn't know who I am, what I am, and I lived a life that just didn't really actually work. And I'm lost. I don't know where I belong or where I come from or where I'm going.
Hmm.
And then we surrender to something greater than ourselves. God, I can't do this anymore. Like I did when I was coming out of drugs and crime. It's like, I just don't know what I'm doing.
Mm,
I need help. Not even sure
mm,
if you're real, God, but if you are real, well, I'm fucking open now. It's like, because I
mm,
know I don't have what it takes. I need something other than me. So I love the story of Jesus for that reason, because when presented properly, it points you to another, even
mm.
though it is our nature essentially. From an ego identity, rigid construct perspective, we need to have the sense of another because we need to get over ourselves and lose our life so that we can gain it. And so I think it's really beautiful if presented properly. But then mechanically speaking, which I kind of gave some of the mechanics, like there is a need for us to pause and to examine our identity
Mm.
structures, how it plays out, where it's causing problems, and really be willing to let go of control in order to relax into the what's so great about God is like you don't have to do it. Like you don't
You
have
are.
to you don't have to try to be what essentially already was from the beginning. It's happening right now. It sounds so simplistic, but that's the basics. So we relax people down, right, through guided processes, right? So it's like for me, it's compressing few years of Zen Buddhist meditation into a few moments, right? Like I could literally take someone to the state that took me probably quite a few months to even get into, of like a
Mm,
calm mind. I could take people into that within 30 seconds, or less sometimes. And that there's like an instant regulation, an instant sense of I am awareness of my thoughts, emotions, and feelings. So we take
mm.
people to that mechanically, and that becomes a practice. So like the ongoing coaching process is like anything, developing a new habit of being awareness,
Yeah.
right? It's not
The
something
whole
we're gonna
goal is so that they can get there themselves.
totally. So it's like training wheels, guidance, but they have to sit in that practice and go through the motions and observe their own inner world, and that becomes more habitual over time. And then we start to more distinctly examine the identity structures. Like there's frameworks that I use to help us pinpoint all the different ways that we're efforting to escape
Mhm.
something painful that we have long forgotten. And we don't see that that's how we're actually operating. So I don't want to get too technical and detailed about it, but just we have to examine those inner mechanics of our identity
Mm,
so that we can release them. Because once they're conscious, because they're all running unconsciously,
mm.
they manifest in things that we're conscious of, but the causes behind the manifestation, which is our different behaviors, our attitudes, and interpretations and judgments and so on, we got to break down what's actually going on. People need to see it for themselves.
Mm.
This is why I don't like indoctrination, because like when you start laying a belief system on top of an identity structure, you can create psychosis. And I've seen people go nuts in religion.
This is what I call Christianity as a whole, right there. That is the Christian religion, is because think about what you said earlier. It's a powerful story, and I'll just share personally, like I'm listening to your story, and none of that was resonating for me and who I was. And only now can I see through it and like get what it is, to know that it's true. Like I get that. But you can't tell a 5-year-old who has no other experience except his consciousness of life, who is God in itself, right? He's walking around, he cries, he gets what he wants, that you are broken. You should pray down to God because Jesus will save you. Like that indoctrination is the rub, as you can tell. Like I'm just like, that
Yeah.
is not the
I think
way
it's
we
important to
bring
distinguish
people
though.
to God.
Yeah, but that's not the whole of Christianity, Like
No, but
I'm
get
very
that
experienced
that's
with
like what
Christianity.
comes through.
Well, it does,
Or
but they're an extremist edge of a body of people called the body of Christ. I'm tapped into many churches across the world
Mhm.
who are really living invitations to life, and lives are being transformed. I mean, churches that just bring people into the
Sure,
experience of God.
there's
There's like
definitely some, yes.
countless numbers of churches doing this in a way that really works. And so, we are I think it's important to distinguish that what you're talking about is that hard edged, extremist point of view, no different than the Islamic extremists. Like if you meet Islamic people, which I have, and I love them, and I talk to them about God and Jesus, and it's like we get blissed out in the spirit together, and like they have so much understanding, some of them, and it's like I'm like, wow, like we're like on the same page already in so many ways. And,
Mm.
there's some distinct things, but it's like, I don't let those distinct differences bother me. I'm looking for the commonalities, the unity, the cohesion. Like, how do we fit together? And I
Mm.
find so much life in that. But then there's extremists that, I mean, I've met some of them. Some of them are really hard edged. Women are like practically slaves. But that's not always the case. It's like, it's just, you
No,
know?
but I guess what I want you to look at a little further though is the storyline
Mm-hmm.
of Jesus and how it is that one knows God
Mm-hmm.
more is to understand that, like I am broken, to get the lie. That's the lie that everybody comes in to believe. That is true.
Mm-hmm.
But what's missing for me about Christianity is it doesn't provide a level of awareness. It doesn't teach people to tune into themselves and what's actually going on in a present moment. It doesn't give a child who has no sense of an identity yet, it doesn't give him a foundation for which to actually come to the realization. That child has to go through life experiencing. And oh, if he's already got the belief and the just the rote belief faith that oh there's a Jesus Christ already and like yeah, eventually maybe you're hoping, right? That's what the parents are all hoping is that once he has the breakdown of the identity, he will understand Jesus is there and then like fall back into that. But it just doesn't work for a child who doesn't understand identity, who can't conceptualize those things. Do you think that Christianity is doing any service besides just trying to indoctrinate that there's this thing called Jesus Christ and the one day they finally can get to the point where they're now broken, they now have somewhere to turn because they've been told their whole life? Like that's the to me the mechanism by which Christianity works.
Some of it, yeah. And I love that you're highlighting some very important things to bring attention to is the what I would consider to be manipulation, psychological manipulation and control of people, which does happen in various churches. There's various pastors who unfortunately, maybe not even intentionally, don't realize that's what they're doing. On the
Sure.
other side, though, there are powerful, very clear manifestations of God working
Hmm.
that provide healing and deliverance from all kinds of chaos. Prayer has been so powerful in my life. I've been exposed to hundreds of thousands of people in different formats in different ways in churches, like really experiencing God's presence alive through worship and praying together through the special kind of messages or guided you know transmissions, where God's speaking
Hmm.
through the person. And these are felt experiences that are undeniable for me,
Hmm.
real powerful. I can do all of those things. They've come through my body, right? I've laid hands on people, and I've had prayed for women at my restaurant that had period cramps or migraines, and they were instantly relieved.
Hmm.
I've watched the miraculous happen, by just expressing by love and faith. And so I
Hmm.
think, yeah, there's, and then there's seen on the dark side, children's school in Christian church that I actually was baptized in 2001 or something. They teach the literal 6 days of creation to children. And I think that's just ridiculous. That there's like this high indoctrination of what scripture's saying versus my approach is teach how to study and explore it.
Hmm.
And and also, I like to give more better translation first. Start with a real translation of the Bible, and then help them seek and understand the relationship to themselves as an individual.
Hmm.
So I think that's sometimes a missing thing. But I think teaching kids how to pray and lean into a power greater than themselves has a high benefit.
Hmm.
I've hung around a lot of those children, right? I went to public school. I've taught in public schools. I was a volunteer in public schools. I had a class with like 40 kids in it, man. It was crazy, you know. Like this school in Coral Springs was just loaded, and I volunteered. I bring my sound bowl there and do healing sound therapy stuff with them and teaching and talking. It was great. Sixth
Heretic.
graders. But you know, there's a difference. Like in the Christian cultural school, I could feel like there's a quality of consciousness that is there that's really beautiful in a lot of ways. Um, and even like, you know, with my fiance and her church, like the kids are growing up. I mean, we're talking about 28-year-old virgin girls,
Hmm.
you know? Now, some of that was premised on the fear of going to hell and stuff like that, which I don't align with, but like you've got these girls that are like preserving themselves for their man at 28. You don't, in America, that's like, you don't get to be 28 as a female and don't have a body count. You know, I mean, it just isn't. I don't know one girl in America that's a virgin at 28. I've never met one.
Right.
That's a, you know, put her in a freaking on display somewhere because like, you know, Guinness Book of World
Sure.
Records.
She would
But
already
it's
be married if just two.
right, exactly. So it's like, you know, there's
Yeah.
these, you know, phenomenons that I see that, you know, pretty powerful in some ways, you know, like
Sure.
I think that's can be good training. Um, I'm actually working with my girl right now to bring authenticity and truth to her church. And she just delivered a message yesterday about our personal breakdown and our minor infidelities with each other and our lack of faithfulness and our withholding and communication and her struggle with pornography for a period of time that she went through. And she literally came out to the whole church and told the whole freaking story. And like, that's not
Mm.
something that happens in her type of church. So, you know, I'm
Mm.
initiating a different way of being, and it actually went over really well. She said, I saw some of the video, like the back half, last 5 minutes of her, she was crying and in tears, but presenting. And I challenged her to tell the truth. And she wrestled with it a little bit. She didn't resist me. She trusts me, but it was hard for her,
Mm.
you know, because it's about looking good and like what are people going to think, and like, but she took a stand, bro, and I'm so proud of her because, and I think that's what's missing in churches that you and I want to see more of is, you know, the pastor gets on preaching a good mission, but there's a lack of vulnerability. There's a lack of like real sharing of struggle. It's more like a preachy, teachy, authoritarian approach a lot of times, even with a lot of love and
Mm.
whatever. What really pulls me in is when I hear like, yeah, I struggled with pornography, or yeah, and my wife and I have been having this issue, and you know,
Mm.
like actually, I heard a pastor, Rich, in South Florida from VU Church, talk publicly about his struggles with lust and how he opened up to his wife and they had a conversation, had to work through this with other support and pastor. And I was like, wow, I've never heard that from a pastor in my life. You know,
Mm.
like a real pastor of a big church. Like he's very popular. His dad was a big
Mm.
pastor, and he's admitting that. So I think that it's starting to turn. You know, and I'm seeing it in other pastors everywhere too. So the
Yeah.
Christian church must evolve. All religions need to evolve, and we need to start seeing more of what works principally instead of trying to enforce doctrinally
Mm.
what we believe is right.
Totally. All right. Well, we could keep going on forever. I
Yeah,
know
it's a
we
big
can
conversation. We might have
because
to do
it
a part two.
just it never stops.
Yeah.
We're talking about the essence of life.
Right. The
So
word
we could
that's living
always
and
keep
active.
going.
Hmm.
But if we were going to leave our readers with what
Listeners,
might be next, right? What do you say?
come to the Invincible Man group.
Mm.
You know, as a man, if you're a man, come to join us in the practice.
Mm.
It's a practice, it's experiential, it's experimental. You know, we're going to create opportunities to share, to relax, to explore self and others. And, you know, it's an access to new opportunities of awareness and new possibilities of your own potential and how to understand yourself. And so, you know, to me, bringing light to the shadows is what it's all about. The shadows are the subconscious factors that we don't see that do
Mm.
control a lot of our behavior and, for better or for worse, impact our lives.
Mm.
So come to the group. Learn a more universal way. This is like not a religious thing in the sense of like we're not telling you what to believe or how to believe, but we're gonna provide experiences, challenge, take a look at things. The idea is, are you willing to get past your own mind, emotions, and bodily habits to see more of what you really are, not only within yourself, but more of what you are actually inside of relationships and inside
Mm,
of business, inside of all domains of life. Because when you can see beyond your filters, you have a far greater degree of intelligence
mm,
operating, meaning there's way more choice than when you're just running in a very narrow pattern of this is the way I am, this is how it goes, and it's just reacting to every little
mm,
thing. That has
mm.
practical value.
Yeah, absolutely. From a moment by moment experience of life, it has a practical value.
Totally. Pleasurable
So,
value too, because that's real pleasure
yes.
when you're really present.
Um, so come and commune with us, be with us. It's really presence living, right?
Mhm.
That's what it is.
I
And
am invincibleman.com.
I am Invincible Man. I am just I am.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that said, we love you, we welcome you, and we are looking for um, you who is seeking, because we are seeking too.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thanks, Brian.